Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast, where we explore the exciting science behind heart rate variability. The material discussed in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. Please check with your medical provider to make sure any suggestions or strategies are right for you. Visit us at the OptimalHRV.com website to learn more about the Optimal HRV app, download a free copy of Matt's book, Heart Rate Variability, and also get show notes and additional resources around heart rate variability and its applications.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a long-belated edition of the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Matt, we are back.
We are back, baby.
It's been a while. Been way too long, in fact.
Yes.
But we got a lot more coming soon. We've been working pretty hard on a lot of really cool things. But how are you? Lots have happened since the last time we've done a podcast, my friend.
I'm in recovery mode. I have had, I've kind of called this summer my summer of recovery. I think we all came out of the pandemic and everything else going on in the last 12 to 18 months in a different spot. And I think this will be a theme throughout our episode. And I think we've got a follow-up or two on our own journeys with this. But yeah, feeling good. I think I've figured out some things about how to improve my own resiliency and build upon, hey, I survived this, I think. Now how do I get back to thriving again? So it's been a trip. What about you? How have you been?
Yeah, I've been crazy that it's been, 3-4 months since our last episode. I don't know exactly what the last date was. Time flies, man. You got 2 little kids at home. Not too much changes. It's just... except for them.
Yeah, it was a couple months since I last saw them. They just keep getting more and more verbal and taller and taller.
For better and for worse.
Me and Wes are going to be talking about quantum physics here any day now. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, good summer. Good to be back out in the world. Nice to be vaccinated and not, here in Denver. We're very fortunate that the vaccination rate is really high.
Yeah.
I think I heard last weekend that we're up over 75% of adults, which is great. So it's, nice to quote unquote forget your mask and still be able to go shopping or, not even really forget it because you never really needed to bring it. And I know there are a lot of folks out there that aren't as fortunate and they're not living in places that have such a high vaccination rate. So that's not their reality, but we're fortunate enough here where that is. So.
It's nice to get back to normal. I'm not sure what that normal looks like even a couple of weeks from now again, but fingers crossed because I went to a concert on Saturday and wow, was it amazing. So it was great. It was like, oh, wow, I really enjoyed this. So looking forward, hopefully, to more of that. I know we're still in this little tenuous time. There's a lot of red in our state. I saw our map yesterday. So we're just fortunate to live in some of the ones that is doing a little bit better.
That's it. Well, and there's a lot going on, in the world right now that has sort of brought us out of hibernation here to do a podcast because we felt it important while we're going through a lot of development with the product and company and soon to make some really big announcements in the next 6 weeks, which is super exciting. And a lot of the folks listening to this are probably users and have seen a lot of new functionality hit the app in the last couple months. But tell us what instigated this unplanned podcast here.
Well, it's kind of funny. It was sort of a 2-part thing because I wanted to for us to talk about our recovery. We kind of left this a few months ago where I'll be honest, I know my mental health, I think I was honest with all of our listeners, wasn't doing incredibly well. I was doing okay. But it just the wear and tear of what we've all been through collectively. And so, initially I was like, hey, I think I just miss talking to you. I miss these. I want our listeners to know I actually have 5 more episodes already recorded. So we're just sort of waiting for a big announcement, but we will be back in full force soon. And I think Jeff and I are going to do a couple episodes here to get the ball back rolling. And then we're going to come full blast with some great new folks as well. But you know, I was thinking about my own recovery and just my conversations that I've had since our last recording about what people are doing. I've challenged folks to create their own recovery plans, and if I ask other people to do it, I got to do it myself. You know, and part of this was, okay, how do we recover? But there was then, it was yesterday, though, by the time this is published, it might be 3 days ago, and I'm not sure, Japan versus this time, whatever. You know, Simone Biles dropped out of the team gymnastic conversation. And this is something that I think is very interesting. Jeff, I know you and I are both big sports fans, and I'll be honest with our listeners, I watch gymnastics once every 4 years. So I'm not going to pretend I know anything about gymnastics or swimming, but I may have realized NBC sells me on this stuff really well once every 4 years. And so I thought it started some really good conversations in the sports world. As you know, I was someone raised, and I think, Jeff, you kind of come from this as well, of you just play no matter what. Like no matter what. Like, I think I played, if you count like a hip pointer where there was like a grapefruit growing out of my bony hip because I was diving for a loose ball, back injuries, knee injuries. Sometimes you had to kind of tape me together to get me out on the court. And when I look back at my mental health, I was probably more mentally I'm crazy is not the right word, but just mentally tasked. Unhealthy. And at times struggling with insomnia, depression. I wasn't ever good at losing. I quit. I know it's for you love tennis because couldn't deal with my frustration. And I think we're seeing this recognition. One, I hope we recognize that this is a game. It's a game, and maybe we can take it a little less serious. And I know for you and I to say that, we probably should look straight in the mirror first. But you know, it got me thinking about, as we talk about this with athletes and opening up these good discussions, I wanted to bring this to you and to have a discussion here on the podcast. And hopefully our listeners will engage with us around this, about thinking about yourself and your own mental health, because it's not just elite athletes. Yeah, Simone Biles, I think Michael Phelps talked really powerfully about this last night too, about the pressure that they're under. And we all know their names. But there's also this pressure, I feel like, in probably the vast majority of organizations, the vast majority of the jobs, to perform at an incredibly high level no matter what. Up and to the point that if you're not burned out, you're not working hard enough. Unfortunately, I've worked in several organizations that were supposed to be helping people recover their mental health. That was the way we do it. If you weren't burned out, like, God forbid you say you're feeling great, healthy, and energized, you were almost demonized. And the assumption was you're not
working hard enough.
Exactly. So one of the things that I want to kind of build an analogy, and I know I'm walking on my own shaky ground here, but you know, I see, and it's almost too easy of a thing to say it's failed. But if you look at U.S. gymnastics, obviously one of the most, I would say, evil, potentially, sports organizations that have been around, if you've paid any attention to Nasser and all that stuff. So I don't use the word evil very often. I'm okay to use it there. So an organization that's failed its athletes miserably, illegally, ethically, morally, all that stuff. But you look at some of these other athletes as well, whether it's an organization. I know this has hit the tennis world where a team is a little bit different, but there's a lot, these athletes travel around. It's not just like them and their mom traveling to these things. For most of them, they have a crew with them. And so, like, we, I think, are coming to a point where we're going to focus on the mental training and the mental support we give our athletes. And Jeff, I just like to get your opinion on what I'm going to kind of say next is I really believe heart rate variability has changed athletics. And one of the things I wanted to put forth in this podcast, which is going to be a little lesser of our focus, is the seemingly, and I look for some statistics on it, and statistics back it up in most cases, that we're getting elite athletes now in their 30s and in their 40s. I think men's tennis is fascinating. And I think women's tennis is probably the same as, you were kind of done at age 26. And now, like, the three best players in the world, this better than I do, are all sort of in their mid and actually later 30s. So one of the things I believe heart rate variability has done for athletes is this focus on recovery. And what we're seeing, I believe, as part of this result is somebody like LeBron James, questionably, I think at 36, 37, being maybe still the best player in the world. Now, you could debate that, but I don't think you take him out of your top 5 anytime soon. No. And so I wonder, as a sports fan and somebody who follows, I think, an intensely psychologically taxing game that tennis is, here we are, I think, putting a argument forward for mental training as well. And so when you look at where some of these athletes are hitting, I think it's really important that we say, hey, it's good, especially if you're going to flip your body upside down, that you pay attention to where you're at.
Yeah,
mentally,
well, you can
right?
break your neck if you do something wrong.
Yeah, and let's just, for all you players out there that did not flip upside down in your sport, walking on a basketball field or basketball court injured, exhausted, and maybe just mentally not all there, I wasn't risking necessarily breaking my neck. I was risking some other things, but, and so I wonder, as a sports fan and somebody who pays a lot of attention to this, obviously somebody that we're talking about the mental health in HRV, I just love to get kind of your opinion on how can we start to think about the mental side of, mental health is huge, but also preparing our athletes mentally for their competitions in a way that's going to keep them healthier, but also improve performance at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think people are realizing more and more that this is a huge component of what makes the great. Yeah. And there wasn't training in the past. It was just an innate ability. You look at guys like Michael Jordan and, Bjorn Borg and Joe Montana and, all these guys that, why were they the best? Why were they, there were equal athletes, especially maybe not Michael Jordan, but, guys like Dominique Wilkins were just as athletically dominant potentially as, Clyde Drexler. Those guys could jump as high, were the same height, but they didn't have that same mental drive that Michael Jordan had. And you can make those comparisons across sports. But what we didn't do in the past is train. Right. And so what you found was the discrepancy between the great and the good wasn't necessarily athletic ability. It was work ethic. It was that, not desire to win, but like compelling, obsessively compulsive need to win that would drive them. And so I think what you're finding now is, you bring up tennis. Naomi Osaka is a great example of somebody who's supremely talented, one of the better, if not best athletes on tour. She's young, but she's taking her career in a different path than somebody like Serena Williams did, who at her age had won multiple Grand Slam titles, just like she has. But came from the school that you and I came from, and a lot of our listeners probably came from. And, her dad had her out on a court drilling balls, for hours on end every day. And he was training her mentally. Right. And Earl Woods is another great example. People said this stuff borders on child abuse, and it does. And it mentally trained, especially individual athletes, because you're just out there one-on-one or potentially one-on-none. You don't have 4 other guys on the court, 10 other guys on a field, 5 other ladies on a volleyball court, whatever it might be. You're just out there by yourself. And so the folks seemingly, Andre Agassi, his dad was the same way. The ones whose parents or coaches put them through an extreme amount of pressure at a very young age were the ones that were able to handle it when they got older. but there's ways to train that aren't bordering on child abuse. And I think utilizing tools and science and breakthroughs that we've had is now being not only incorporated, but really embraced. And, you know, all the sports performance psychologists out there, I mean, that's a part of every tennis team is a sports psychologist, you know, for the players that can afford it. Every professional athletic team employs at least one at this point. So, you know, now you're kind of combining that training with some innate abilities, and it's just different now. You know, you see people like Nick Kyrgios who, you know, can be a dominant tennis player when he wants to be. But I don't know if the guys now and the ladies now don't take it seriously, if they're more well-rounded, but it's hopefully a much healthier existence for them.
Yeah. And that's been like, I think what I've had to struggle with a little bit, honestly. It's like, you know, because it's like, you know, one, and again, being both playing tennis, I ran run cross country is, I walked quickly across country.
You competed in cross country meets.
Yeah. But it's like this team is like, how do you ever let down your team? Like just that, you know, and almost replacing, I think, that individual where it's really lonely out there on the tennis court. Like I don't care. I imagine I never played in a packed stadium for tennis. You know, I was like number 3, you know, on the high school team as a sophomore. It's about the highest I got. The parents were there. But, you know, it was like just kind of that added pressure to show up for your team. And I think, you know, there's all this stress. And I think you bring up a great point is, how do we have balanced athletes? Because I think you look at like, and it was so great to see the Last Dance documentary, what Michael Jordan was doing. And let's just remember, this is a man partly because of the mental stress he was under, quit the sport for 2 years. I mean, went and played baseball for 2 years. You know, and
family tragedy and
exactly, a tragedy of his trauma kind of spurred that decision, and many other ways. But the guy was like smoking a cigar before games, you know. So we've totally. I think, you know, you look at the next generation with LeBron James, who spends multi-million dollars on his body and his health every year. He would never do that. I wouldn't imagine now, but maybe after a championship, but I don't think he'd even do it after a game in most times. And so we've seen this, like, and I think heart rate variability has been a huge driver of this is, you know, how do you get yourself recovered from the physical stress to perform your best at the next competition? And, you know, what I think where it's been missed, and I see this on other podcasts that I listen to, I love the question that comes up. You have this person who's spending, you know, these professional millions of dollars, and do you practice mindfulness, which we all know would benefit, especially a golfer or a tennis player. It's like, I just can't find the time. And there's still like this piece. And I wonder even if sports psychology has sometimes fallen in to a focus on athletic performance. Like I think we like almost separate it,
right? It's
the athlete from the person.
Yeah, exactly.
With this. And this is sort of the open question that I have is, now that we know, and I think heart rate variability, one of the things that we saw wasn't happening and why we went on this journey to create Optimal HRV is folks weren't paying attention to all this mental health research on heart rate variability. They were looking at stress,
physical recovery.
Yeah, exactly. As physical stress. Well, we know how do we
build the workout around your recovery patterns? But it's all about the workout, right? It's
absolutely
how many miles are we going to run, how much weight we're going to lift, what kind of stuff we're going to do today based on your HRV score, not
exactly. And hey, everybody needed a kick in the butt to probably say, I should take it a little easier today. Because if we didn't have data, that mentality never would have crept in. And so what I believe I'm seeing is, you know, people's insight to themselves. And again, I think with Simone Biles, you put your life at risk when you got what she does on any of those. I would die within 5 seconds. I couldn't even run probably and keep my breath to get to the horse or whatever. So you know, there's no threat because I just couldn't do it. But like to put me midway through one of those, I'd be dead, so there's that added level, but it's like, I can't do this. And I think, how do we start to have the conversation? And athletics is sometimes good because it gives us a event with a clear outcome at the end. You win gold, you win silver, you win.
What's your time?
You lose.
Score? What's your
exactly? So now that we've got this information, how do we start to train mentally? And this is where I think we can also take the conversation outside, the elite of the elite athletes, to us, to what is our routine to deal with the stress and strain, the psychological for most of us, though the physical probably is secondary for us, the psychological is primary, to show up at work and be your best self, to be the best teammate, to be the parent, the spouse, that we all really need to be in our life, and to think about training. And it doesn't need to be an hour of training each and every day to bring our best to our own performance. And I think that, how many days should we have called in, right? Should we have followed Simone's lead to say, I can't do it today? And again, maybe the consequences in the short term aren't, well, the consequences of breaking your neck doing some crazy ass stuff, those aren't our consequences. But hey, if you don't show up at your best for weeks and years at a time, and that stress and strain you're holding in it, as I like to say, that we look at work stress, cancer, diabetes, stroke, heart disease, early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, mental health issues, anxiety, depression. All of this stuff is that consequence too. So we can take, I think, the lessons that we're seeing and saying, how does this apply to us? And that's not the conversation that I'm hearing anywhere, shape, or form. It's kind of athletes talking about athletes, either judging negatively or, doing this positively, or somewhere in between. But very few people are saying, okay, what about me? What about my performance? Because what NBC does, and I'm going to watch the Olympics again tonight. So NBC, you do what you do. You do it really well because you get me excited about, swimming. I watched Ledecky swim for like 3.5 hours and was enthralled every minute of it last night. So I'm going to watch again tonight. But they play out this hero's journey in these like 5 to 6 minute clips. This is the struggle that this athlete had to overcome to perform. So watching the women's triathlon the other day, the woman from Bermuda, I think it might have been Barbados, I think it was Bermuda, who won that race, just kicked everybody's butt. Over and over, what they said is she overcame an eating disorder. She overcame an eating disorder. She overcame and did not finish at the last Olympics. It's like we had to reinforce the darkness of her journey to make her accomplishment even greater. And I think we need to really rethink playing people's mental struggles, physical struggles, as something we got to put into the story to make it even better. Right. So this was all set up, and I don't think it's happening, but like, boy, think about how NBC would have jumped on if Biles was going to compete in the individual all around. Right. Oh, what a story that would be, and how we would celebrate that for years. So I think we've got to be careful here, because I think a lot of us have internalized this ourselves is, hey, there's something wrong with me that I'm in this dark place. There's something wrong with me that, I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, or I don't have energy for a workout at the end of the day. And I think we've got to really step back and say, you don't have to spend time in that dark place. You don't have to spend time. So for a lot of us, with the message that we'll have in our next short podcast as well, it's about recovery. And I think probably a lot of us before the pandemic hit could have focused a lot on our mental health recovery already. Just when you see the statistics about burnout, you see these statistics on mental health. But now, after being through this collective trauma, that, and I don't use the word trauma lightly, that a lot of us have been through. I'm not going to say the last 18 months have been traumatizing for everybody, but for a lot of us, it's been borderline, if not over that line, with losing loved ones, with fear for our own life and wellness, with disruptions to jobs, with our, having to teach our kid. All this stress that's been put on us is now we're probably in an even darker place for a lot of us. What are we going to do with recovery, and how do we take that forward and see ourselves to some extent as athletes? Right? I like throwing musicians in there too for folks who may not be all bought in on the athletic side of things, of how do we prepare to bring our best to life, whatever role that might be for you. And the good news is heart rate variability will allow you to track that. And to me, that's where we are at with this science is, yeah, it is great for LeBron James to be on a high-end device. But it's just important for me as somebody who's not shooting for a personal best probably ever again in my entire life. I don't even know what my personal best would be. Like, I want to be healthy. I want to feel good. I want to, be mentally healthy. So I'm crafting around that. Every morning, wake up, take that HRV reading and tells me, how am I doing? I'm going to take Friday off because I've been about 20% lower this week. Again, I'm doing really well this summer. I can't wait for the next episode to brag about my scores, Jeff. But I'm also seeing.
I thought you were just going to bring that up at the beginning of this episode.
No, I'm holding on. But I'm seeing this drop compared to where I've been the rest of the summer. Not the same energy. Just need that extra day to bounce back and be my best self for the next week. So again, we can quantify this. And again, my challenge to all the HRV nerds out there, which we've heard from a lot of you and appreciate the encouragement to get our butts back on the air, is, yeah, it can tell you how hard you need to push yourself for your workout that day. Absolutely can tell you that. But for the rest of us who aren't Olympic athletes, it's also telling us how much energy do you have? How well has your self-care been really addressing the mental, psychological stress that you've been under? And how can you do little things each and every day, whether that's, some mindful breathing, whether that's, I've been walking. I've almost given up running and just put on a good book and just walking and finding great benefits of that with my score, getting a good night's sleep, eating anti-inflammatory foods, hanging out with good friends, who may not fill you with good margaritas like you do sometimes, but you get cost and benefits to our friendship for sure. So I think that's our challenge, Jeff, is like, we can quantify this. HRV is great at quantifying it, but let's take the Simone, what's going on in the tennis world, what's I think, again, Michael Phelps is talking really well about this right now too for athletes. I want to think about you, right? How many days should you have called in? Because you weren't necessarily going to be at your best performance, but what she also did, if you listen to the more in-depth details, she knew she was going to hurt her team, and I think that's what gets.
She didn't let her team down. She knew that somebody more ready to perform was likely going to score better.
Exactly.
So she did it for herself and equally so, or probably even more so, for her team.
Yep. And I think that people like me who grew up in no matter what out there, I look back at myself and like, I'll just share with our audience, freshman year of college, first time I lost a significant number of games in my career, I might have slept 10 hours a week. I was going through a major depressive episode. I also learned how to diagnose mental illness at the time. So I could look at those symptoms and check. I was not well, but I was taught I had to show up. Now, what if I would have taken 2 weeks off and done intensive therapy and just maybe disconnected even from school a little bit at the time? Because I was a guy who, even if I only slept an hour a night, I woke up the next day and went to my 8 o'clock class. Like I had to be perfect there too. And I think I look back at that and said, what the heck, guys? Did 20 years later, would anybody care if Lindsey Wilson College won an additional game or lost an additional game? So I look back at her. The initial thing is, how can you let down your team? Boy, stepping back and really listening to say, oh, at 24, you're wiser than, my initial reaction as a 46-year-old. You got some wisdom that I don't have. So she challenged me to look at, hey, how can I bring her mentality into my life as well? So the challenge for all of our listeners out there, think about yourself. Let's avoid the judgment of the athletes. And let's say, hey, have I gone to work sick? Have I gone to work without a good night's sleep? Do I do things every day to get myself mentally, cognitively, socially prepared to thrive in my own life? And if I think we all could say there's work we could do, taking that serious. And I think she's given us a chance to really look in the mirror and say, what about me? And I think that's a really good challenge for all of us. And again, we can quantify that now. That's the difference between a self-care message to say, hopefully you feel better, right?
Sure.
Now, and we can measure that in performance and other things, but now we're saying, you'll see this. I get when I eat unhealthy or have one too many drinks, I see it the next day in my HRV score. I'm a little healthier. I'm trying to really hone in on what's the best miles to go on a hike each and every day. I want to get down to the half mile of what is going to get me up to, I'm not going to mention my score until next week, up into the highest echelons of my RMSSD scores. And so again, we can quantify this in a way that we've never been able to do really in history at an affordable rate. So I think there's a lot of really good things we can take away from this moment.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something earlier, Matt, that I think maybe you didn't mean exactly. You said you're not trying to set, your personal records or your, that kind of stuff. Yeah, maybe not in a race.
Right.
But certainly, we're trying to build a company.
Right. Absolutely.
And your consulting business continues to grow, right? And so you are trying to every day do something that you haven't done before and further the work that you do and perform at a higher level, right? And it's not physically necessarily, but to your point, mentally is equally or more, certainly more important when you look at the average person, not the average, the 99.9% of people who aren't professional athletes or CEO, whatever, the people that just everybody. Yeah, that's what we should be focused on. How can I become a better parent tomorrow? How can I become a better salesperson, a better therapist, a better whatever you do? And continually pushing through is not the way to do it.
Right.
And that's how we use these numbers to better understand and accept that. And I think that's really cool.
And I'm taking Friday off for you in some ways, right? Now, I got some things on my to-do list. Maybe I could waddle through some of those on Friday if I needed to. But I know when I hit those on Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to give a better self. And I think we got to bring that aspect. And you're exactly right. I think my thinking with the personal record in some ways, like personal best, is I'm driving to be there every day. Like that's the whole thing, is I want to, that's what HRV has taught me is, I can have some of those peak days sometimes, but this summer with my recovery, I've been able to raise the bar gradually with my a 30-day average, with my all-time average. Those are what gets me excited. Those spikes up or even the spikes down I get at times. Okay. But boy, where I get really excited is to see, okay, in the last month over month, I'm jumping 5-10 points. One, it showed probably how mentally unhealthy I was getting towards, the springtime with living through the pandemic. But it's I think a new personal record for me is showing up every day at close to my best, right? Like I said, I'm very realistic about this. I'm not going to be the guy that says, I feel so much energy every day. I know I may come across like that on the podcast, but I'm not. I have my good days. I have my bad days. I'm not a guy who says, hey, take my supplement and you will feel amazing every single moment of your entire life. Right? I never buy supplements for those people. They're just not human beings in my opinion, or I don't know, but it's just like, how do we gradually raise that bar up and up and up? And again, that's why I love what our app does for me personally is wake up every morning. Where am I today versus where I am this week? How does my week compare to my month? How does my month compare to all times? And what gets me so excited to see that all-time average substantially raise up this summer. So again, it's a little different way of looking at it, but I think you're absolutely right. I've added a lot of really exciting stress to my life, but how I manage that is going to really determine, am I going to be successful or not?
That's it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think well worth taking 30 minutes to talk through, because
yes.
With the transition out of COVID into the quote unquote new normal, all the things going on with the Olympics, and just an interesting moment in time that no one really has experienced before, and
right.
It all really sort of relates to what we do and what we're trying to help people accomplish. So
yeah, one more lesson just to throw in there real quick. I think part of the struggles of the athletes in this Olympics is not having loved ones with them. And it just also shows, I think, it does show, because research, without that, social support is such a big piece of this as well. And a lot of us have been isolated. I know a lot of folks may be out there with some social anxiety, but I think that's another big takeaway too, that, hey, if you don't have your team there, it's just harder to stay healthy, to stay focused in that way. So,
absolutely.
Yep, shout out. And I just want to say to folks, Jeff and I are going to do one more episode. I promise you, I got 5 ready to go. We were just kind of holding off a little bit till we get this new version out that has so many exciting features to it that we're probably not supposed to talk about until we actually get them out to the world. But it's coming, including individual memberships. We just want to make sure we get all these updates into the app before we put it out there in that way. But check us out, optimalhrv.com. Still, if you haven't downloaded the book, a lot of folks contacting us around the world that have read the book, so you can download it for free on our website as well.
That's it. Well, thanks again to everybody for sticking with us, and we look forward to picking a very consistent podcast cadence back up here in the next 6 weeks.
Absolutely. Everybody take care.
Thanks, everybody.